So, Kevin, I feel like we bully you a little bit too much. You're our SoftBank guy, and we saw that story, which is okay. Read the headline. I think it's from Bloomberg. It said, "SoftBank attempt to get $6 billion OpenAI margin loan stalls." So, actually, why don't you introduce this one, Kevin? Like, what was this story purporting was happening on the SoftBank side?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna try to pull it up right now.
Oh, okay. No, okay, I can introduce it. I put you on the spot a little bit. So like the TLDR is like Masa tried to talk to a bank to see whether he could collateralize his OpenAI stake to get a loan to invest in more OpenAI. So it's just like a margin investing play. And I think the banks were like, fuck no. We're not gonna let you do that.
Yeah,
Bold.
yeah. I
Really bold.
mean, but by the way, though, Masa has used this strategy, this financing strategy for decades. I don't know if this is, something that you guys are aware of or the public is
No.
aware of, but he's always borrowed against public shares to finance anything that he wants to do in the company, and generally has been able to get it pretty easily because, first of all, he's borrowing against like Alibaba, for example. Back in the day, he would always borrow cash against Alibaba shares. I think he borrowed cash against his ARM shares as well, where they own 92% or something of ARM, which is a publicly traded business. And so it's usually easy to like borrow against these because the shares are publicly traded stocks. So like the bank can mark to market every single day what it's worth. And the other thing is Japanese banks in particular, interest rates in Japan are some of the lowest in the world, and all these Japanese banks have tons and tons of cash. And so he can usually get a lot of power to borrow, plus at a very low rate. So it's something that he's been doing for a very, very long period of time. But I guess I'm not sure why the lenders perhaps, didn't want to do this. I think one is OpenAI is still obviously a private company.
Yeah.
So there's not that same public like valuation you can market every single day, and the lender knows exactly what the value of that collateral is. And then the second is maybe there's some hesitation that like, hey, Anthropic is doing really well. Is OpenAI still worth the valuation that that they claim it is, the most recent round, like 850 billion, or is it actually lower than that? Like, is that a fair mark now? So I think there's probably a couple of different questions that have caused the lenders to get a little bit antsy in doing this. But it's interesting because Masa has always borrowed tons and tons of money to fund all the crazy projects that he's wanted to do, and usually it's worked quite well.
Yeah, but you've made I think you elucidated the key distinction here, like public equities versus private, right? So even this is not the right kind of analogy here, but even today, like I can collateralize my own public equities, go to my private banker and say like, give me a little bit of cash so I can renovate my house, right? Like there's really like established products, at least in private banking, for this kind of stuff. Obviously, not nearly the same thing as what we're talking about here, but I can't go show them my angel investments or my TVPI and say like, look, like it's going great, right? Like give me like a couple $1 million or something like that. The banks are gonna be like, yeah, there's no way we can underwrite this kind of thing. So I think that's kind of the step up in boldness is what I've heard from your historical narrative here. Is just like, has he tried? It doesn't sound like he's ever tried, or there's not any public knowledge that he's tried to use private equity stakes as collateral.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, actually, you know what? I do recall that at some point the Vision Fund did get like a loan on their, portfolio from a large like private credit PE fund. So there's been some of that, but usually you can't borrow a lot, right? Like they'll give you a very like
No,
low loan to value on that, which means like say the portfolio is
no,
worth whatever $100, they might only let you borrow $10 or like
yeah,
$15 against that, right? So it's just not as effective as, publicly traded shares. I think the tough part now is because so much of SoftBank is levered to OpenAI shares and exposure, like this has become the crown jewel that unfortunately is a private company versus all the like past crown jewels were public, right? Alibaba was public, ARM was public. So like it's just a really tough space to be now where, you know, his crown jewel is not a publicly traded business. And that's probably why he's also pushing, you know, OpenAI to go public as soon as possible.
Yeah. I don't think they need that much more push, though. I mean, there's so much exogenous pressure on this business where they're like, we got to get access to this liquidity while we can, too. So, yeah, super interesting, exotic financing. Next time I walk into a Wells Fargo, I'll be like, hey, can you give me like a couple 100,000 on the spot? Look at my venture capital portfolio. That's, you know, doing something there, I guess, on paper.